An airtight alibi, held together with potatoes and lies. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Tell me in the comments where you're watching. This mystery needs your company. Your messages always bring a smile. Let's uncover the truth. It was 10 minutes to 1, which put me in the kitchen doorway with an eye on the dining room, and an ear open for Fritz's final flourish. Lunch was already promising. I'd smelled what could only be truffle-laced lamb and, if my nose wasn't hallucinating, potatoes whipped to a consistency that might get written up in poetry if the right kind of glutton ever took up a pen. That's when the doorbell rang. The tone of it, a long, low buzz with no attempt at charm, was enough to make me grimace. Not because someone had come calling, people often do, usually to be told to go away, but because of the timing. If Nero Wolfe hadn't already settled into his chair, I might have ignored it and let the buzzer echo unanswered into obscurity. But he was in place, which meant protocol. I crossed the front room, swung open the door, and there she stood. 30-something, tall, lean, dressed in white with a crispness that looked straight off a high-end cooking show. Her hair was the color of cinnamon toast and done up in a no-nonsense bun. In her hand was a small insulated bag, the kind you'd use to smuggle foie gras through customs, and on her face was the kind of expression that told you she either ran a kitchen or could run a company if you gave her an apron. "My name is Nora Carville," she said, without waiting for me to ask. "I'm here to see Mr. Wolfe. It's urgent, and I brought him something." I eyed the bag. "Unless it's a case of orchids in full bloom, you might want to try again at 3. "It's mashed potatoes," she said, with a dash of horseradish and a secret I'd rather tell him in person. Now, I've had plenty of strange items walk into Wolfe's house, but I'd never had mashed potatoes show up with a motive. "I'm Archie Goodwin," I said, "which makes me the poor sap responsible for opening that door. Come in. You're about to interrupt lunch, so tread softly." Wolfe didn't look up when I led her into the office. He was already ensconced in his chair, massive and motionless, with a thin copy of Cuisine Française in one hand and a disapproving frown in the other. I cleared my throat. "Sir, this is Miss Nora Carville. She brought food, and possibly a problem." That got a flick of the eyes, which for Wolfe was practically a cartwheel. "A problem," he said, still not deigning to glance directly at her. "And mashed potatoes," I added helpfully. "I'm not in need of either at the moment." "Thank you." Nora Carville stepped forward. She didn't curtsy or crumble. She just placed the small, insulated bag on the edge of Wolfe's desk, with the care of someone who knew the value of presentation. "I'm the executive sous chef at Belgrave. Maybe you've heard of it. 2 Michelin stars. The head chef is Aaron Galt." Wolfe's brow twitched. "I know of him," he said. "His sauce béarnaise is overpraised." She didn't blink. I wouldn't argue. But this isn't about sauces. It's about sabotage, and I need your help because if I go to the police, the only person they'll arrest is me. I could practically hear Wolfe's blood pressure rise, and not from indignation. He waved a finger at the bag. "What's in there?" "Mashed potatoes," she said, "with a sleeping pill in them. I didn't add it, but the man who ate them passed out in the walk-in. They think I did it to take over his position. They're wrong." For a moment silence sat thick in the room. Wolfe breathed in slowly. Then, reluctantly, as if a sacred ritual had been desecrated, he shifted in his chair. "Miss Carville," he said, "you are intruding upon my lunch hour. The last person to do so had to be a district attorney with a subpoena. You are not a district attorney, nor, to my knowledge, have you brought a subpoena." She opened her mouth, but Wolfe overrode her. "However, a poisoned potato dish is not without interest, especially if your claim is true that you did not add the sedative. That, Miss Carville, would make you a pawn or a patsy. Neither pleases me." I don't want to be either, she said. And you believe someone set you up? I know it, she said. The kitchen's a war zone. Aaron Galt is being forced into retirement. A new head chef is about to be named. Everyone's gunning for it, but Aaron, he's old school. He trusts me, or did. I looked at Wolf. He hadn't moved, but I could tell by the angle of his nose that the scent from the bag had reached him. He spoke again, crisp and quiet. Who else had access to the dish? She hesitated. Everyone, that's the problem. The mashed potatoes were made in a shared prep area. I plated them, but someone could have... Enough. Wolf lifted a hand. Archie. Yes, sir? Open the bag. I did. Inside was a ceramic dish sealed with wax paper. The scent wafted out. Rich, creamy, with just enough bite to make your sinuses wake up. Wolf leaned forward, sniffed once, then sat back. You are fortunate, he told Nora Carville. You brought quality. That may buy you 3 minutes more than you deserve. She gave the barest hint of a smile. Then I'll be quick. By the time she finished laying it out, Wolf had dispatched Fritz to refrigerate the evidence and turned his full attention to the matter. According to Nora, Aaron Galt collapsed during lunch prep after sampling a tasting spoon of potatoes she'd prepared. He was found by a pastry assistant, out cold on the floor of the walk-in. The hospital found a mild sedative in his system, enough to knock him out for a few hours but not do any damage. But the restaurant panicked. Health inspectors got involved. The press was sniffing around, and management saw their chance to dump Aaron and pin the scandal on her. Convenient, fast, clean. Except Nora wasn't having it. She had ambitions, but not that kind. And now she was in a bind. If she fought it publicly, it would look like desperation. If she stayed silent, her career was toast. That's where Wolf came in. Or so she hoped. He stared at her, then closed his eyes. Mr. Goodwin, he murmured. Yes. You will escort Miss Carville out, take down the names of everyone who worked in that kitchen yesterday, and collect a list of staff access logs for the walk-in, if such a modern atrocity exists. You're taking the case? I asked. I am considering it, Wolf said. But I require proof that this woman is not a fool or a liar. That is your task. See to it. I didn't mind the assignment. A kitchen full of backbiting chefs, secrets simmering on the stove, and one of them, maybe slipping sedatives into the mashed potatoes. That had all the ingredients for a decent day's work. And Nora Carville, for all her pressed uniform and cool composure, had just enough steel under the surface to make things interesting. Wolf might not have said it outright, but I'd bet half a jar of Fritz's gooseberry preserves that he was already hooked. We got Nora into a cab, and I got a card from her with the address of Belgrave and her cell number written on the back in a swift, clean script. I pocketed it and made a mental note not to lose it. Might be useful if things got messy. 20 minutes later, I was standing at the back entrance of Belgrave, where all the magic and mayhem happened. The place was already buzzing like a disturbed beehive. Someone had let the staff know the health inspector might be back, and the sous chefs were scrubbing everything like it owed them money. A guy in white with forearms like hams was hosing down crates of fennel as if they'd committed treason. I flashed my card, one of the spares that said Archie Goodwin, confidential assistant, and did the usual dance. I didn't throw Wolf's name around unless necessary. Instead, I leaned on charm, vague authority, and the kind of expression that suggested I'd already spoken to someone important and wasn't about to be stopped now. It usually worked. It worked here. The kitchen manager, a tense woman named Linda Yee with a clipboard welded to her hip and a bandana tied over her short black hair, intercepted me with the air of someone who had precisely 5 seconds of tolerance. Left. I'm not giving another statement, she snapped before I could say a word. The health inspector got his yesterday and corporates got mine in writing. If you're from the press, I'm not, I said smoothly. But thanks for thinking I look that polished. I'm here on behalf of a private investigation. Off the record. No articles, no headlines, no mess. Just a few quiet questions to help clear up something that's looking a little too convenient. That last word got her attention. She narrowed her eyes. You're here for Nora? I didn't. Answer directly, which was answer enough. She sighed and looked around before lowering her voice. Look, Nora's good, but she's got enemies. That kitchen runs like a cold war. Nobody trusts anybody. She was Aaron's right hand, and some of the others didn't like that. Especially, given the rumors. What rumors? That Aaron was stepping down, voluntarily or otherwise, and that the top spot was going to one of the in-house team. Nora was assumed to be the front-runner. Anyone else in the running? She grimaced. Everyone with a knife and ego, basically. But 3 serious contenders. Lionel Preet, senior saucier, Tanya Lorkin, pastry lead, and a guy named Chaz Mika, who thinks being loud equals talent. Charming, I muttered. And where were they during the Spud incident? All on the floor. Prepping lunch. The mashed potatoes were in a communal bain-marie, while Nora plated. Anyone could have added something. Were there cameras? In the dining area. Not in the prep line. Management says it's about trust. I say it's about cheap wiring. She handed me a sheet of names and positions, clearly printed and highlighted, with the neurotic energy of someone who'd done this twice already. Everyone who was on that shift. If you're going to ask questions, do it fast. The place is on edge. I thanked her and made a beeline for the break area, a cramped little room with a fridge covered in passive-aggressive notes and a bulletin board threatening disciplinary action in 10 different fonts. That's where I found Chaz Mika, sprawled on a metal chair like he owned the building. He had a buzz cut, a loud shirt under his apron, and the kind of smirk that begged to be wiped off. He was spooning yogurt into his mouth like it had insulted. Him, Chaz? I asked. He looked me up and down. Yeah? I'm not a cop, I said. I'm worse. I work for someone who thinks logic is a weapon. So unless you want to end up as Exhibit A in a verbal takedown, answer straight. He snorted. Let me guess. Wolf. Heard about him. Big guy. Never leaves the house. You forgot orchids. And a stomach that respects only Fritz Brenner. That shut him up for half a beat. What do you want? Mashed potatoes. The kind that put your boss to sleep. You see anything weird yesterday? Around the time those spuds were being finished? He shrugged. It's a circus in there. People move fast, bump into each other. Nora had the bowl near the garnish station. Lionel was slicing chives. Tanya walked by with her little tray of herbs. Anyone could have dropped something in. But they're pinning it on her because she was closest. Were you? I was grilling duck, not exactly lurking around carbs. Any beef with Nora? Everyone's got beef with everyone here. It's a kitchen. We argue about garlic ratios, but no, she's solid. If anyone had it out for her, it was Tanya, the pastry witch. That sounds personal. She acts like she invented sugar, and she hated that Aaron liked Nora's palate. Better. I left him gnawing on passive resentment and went looking for Tanya. Found her piping whipped chocolate into tart shells like they owed her money. She didn't glance up. If this is about Nora, I have nothing to say, she said. I pulled up a stool. That's fine, I've got enough chocolate in my life, but you were near the mashed potatoes yesterday. So were 10 other people. Are you accusing me? Not yet, but I'm keeping a chart. That got a flicker of a smile, more bitter than sweet. Nora's got her fans, but she was gunning for the top and Aaron trusted her blindly. That kind of loyalty makes people reckless. Meaning? Meaning if she didn't do it, someone new framing her would be easy. Someone like you. She met my eyes. If I wanted her out, I'd just let her overplay her hand, not drug our head chef with potatoes. It wasn't a denial, but it wasn't a confession either. I logged it and moved on. Lionel Preet was harder to corner. Tall, quiet, surgical in his movement, with a sauce spoon always in hand. and the bearing of a surgeon. When I finally caught him between reductions, he gave me 10 seconds. "I didn't drug anyone," he said. "If you're looking for malice, look for loud voices, not calm ones. I'm looking for access. You were near the bowl. Garnish, I didn't touch it. And if someone wanted to sabotage Nora, that would be the way. Use her trust, her proximity. And Aaron? He's old. He was slipping. But this was theatre. Not a fall. A performance." I left the kitchen with more quotes than answers, but one thing was clear. Everyone in that room knew how to plait betrayal with style. They were artists, with knives. Back at the brownstone, I laid it all out for Wolf. He didn't interrupt, didn't grunt, didn't fidget, just sat there, eyes closed, fingertips pressed together like he was communing with the spirits of deduction past. When I finished, he spoke. "There is something wrong," he murmured. "A performance, yes, but not on Aaron Galt's part. On someone else's. We must provoke the mask to crack, which means return tomorrow, stir the pot, find the moment where ambition overrides caution. And until then..." He reached for his bell. "Fritz," he called. "I will have the mashed potatoes, heat them gently." I smirked. "Testing for clues?" No, lunch was interrupted, and I detest waste. The next morning, I showed up at Belgrave looking like I had a reservation and a reason to cancel it. I was dressed sharper than the sourcing knives and carried myself with just enough official stiffness to make people straighten up, but not so much that they'd call security. Wolf had given me a simple directive: shake the tree and see what falls out. And if that tree happened to grow over a kitchen with a vendetta garden underneath it, so much the better. The mood was different than the day before, tighter, like someone had turned down the temperature, but kept the pressure up. Staff spoke in clipped tones, movement was more deliberate, and nobody wanted to be caught doing anything that might look remotely interesting. Suspicion had settled over the place like a dusting of powdered sugar, fine, visible, and easily blown into the wrong corners. Linda Yee met me near the pantry with her clipboard and the same "you've got 2 minutes" expression. "We've got a tasting menu rehearsal today. Make it quick." "I'll do my best," I said. "But today's not about questions, it's about watching." That earned me a wrinkle of the brow. Watching what? People. Reactions. Slip-ups. Accidental honesty. She narrowed her eyes. "You want me to let you loiter?" Think of me as a very polite health inspector with a better tailor. To my surprise, she nodded. "Fine, but stay out of the way, and if you open a fridge, I'm calling the cops." I slipped into a corner of the prep line, careful to keep a clear line of sight on the key players. Lionel Preet, focused and fluid, as ever, slicing radishes into paper-thin curls. Tanya Lorkin, flitting from counter to counter with a pastry brush like she was applying war paint. And Chaz Mika, loud enough to be heard 3 stations over, tossing insults and instructions in equal measure. Nora wasn't there, which was odd considering she was still technically sous chef, even if she'd been semi-suspended while the incident was under review. I made a mental note to check in with her later. Either she'd been benched by management, or she'd benched herself to avoid becoming the centerpiece of a second food scandal. For half an hour, I just watched. The rhythm of the kitchen was like a jazz quartet, tight improvisation around a known structure. But something was off. Every so often, Lionel would glance at Tanya. Tanya would glance at Chaz. Chaz didn't glance at anyone, he just made noise, but even that felt performative, like he was overcompensating. And the tension? You could cube it and saute it in. Duck fat. Then it happened. Lionel stepped away from his station to speak to the maitre d', leaving his prep area unguarded. Tanya passed by, seemingly en route to the dessert fridge. As she moved past Lionel's worktop, her hand dipped just slightly. her body blocking the movement from most angles, but not mine. A second later, she was gone. Lionel returned, picked up his spoon and resumed garnishing without pause. If he noticed anything amiss, he didn't show it. I waited 5 beats, then stepped forward like I'd dropped something and leaned in. There it was. A small scrap of parchment paper tucked beneath the cutting board, barely visible. I eased it out with the edge of my pen. It was blank. Or rather, mostly blank, except for a faint greasy smear that smelled strongly of lavender and fish sauce. Not exactly a love note. I tucked the paper into my pocket and made a quiet exit. My next stop was Nora. I found her at a cafe 2 blocks down, sitting at a table with a bitter-looking espresso and a legal pad full of scribbled notes. She looked up as I approached, not surprised to see me. "You saw something," she said. I sat down. Tanya dropped a piece of scented paper under. "Lionel's board. Either it's some kind of culinary voodoo or someone's setting someone else up." Nora frowned. "Lavender? Lavender and fish sauce. Not exactly a bouquet you'd bottle. That sounds like her. She's obsessed with aromatic pairings, but she wouldn't use fish sauce, not unless she wanted someone to think Lionel was contaminating his station." Exactly. Someone's trying to make it look like Lionel's the saboteur. And they're doing it while you're out of the picture. She stared at her notepad. They're framing him now. Or framing him framing you. Her mouth tightened. That's convoluted. Welcome to Wolf's world. I filled her, in on the rest of what I'd seen, then got her to sketch out the layout of the prep line and the last known movements from the day Aaron Galt hit the floor. As she spoke, the shape of the sabotage began to take form. Not just the who, but the how. "They used a tasting spoon," she said finally, eyes narrowing. "That's what he tried. A single spoonful of mashed potatoes. Shared ladles, shared bowls, easy to drop something into a tasting spoon just before it's handed over. And everyone saw me hand it to him. But nobody saw who handed it to you." She leaned back in her chair. "I was focused on presentation. That's what I do. I trust the mise en place. I trust the staff." I didn't say what I was thinking. That trust was a luxury kitchens like this couldn't afford. Headed back to the brownstone with the scented paper and a diagram Nora had drawn. Fritz let me in with the sort of smile he reserves for people who don't mess with his schedule. And Wolf was already in his chair, sipping beer and listening to Haydn with a look of mild disdain, like the composer had missed a note 2 centuries. Sargo and Wolf was still taking it personally. I gave him the paper. He sniffed it, held it up to the light, then passed it back. Synthetic lavender. Thai anchovy base. A novelty scent used in some high-end molecular kitchens. Pretentious. So it's not Lionel's? Certainly not. Mr. Preet would sooner burn his fingers than allow that combination near his garnishes. And Tanya? She would use it, but not on parchment. She uses parchment only for baking. If she were communicating or framing, it would be in a medium more consistent with her station, which means someone is mimicking Tanya's habits badly enough for a trained eye to notice. I blinked. So the frame job was meant to be discovered? Wolf nodded, pleased. Yes, and the implication is not that Lionel is guilty, but that Tanya wants him to be thought guilty. A second layer of deception, which points to Chaz. Obvious, loud, and overcompensating, Wolf said. A personality ill-suited to subtle manipulations, but precisely the sort who believes himself clever enough to attempt them. So now what? Wolf leaned back, steepled his fingers, and closed his eyes. We summon them. The 3 of them, Preet, Lorcan, Meeker. Here tomorrow at 4. I raised an eyebrow. All at once. Indeed. The moment for theatre has come. If they wish to perform, we shall give them a stage. I started toward the door to make the calls, then paused. You think one of them slipped the sedative? Wolf opened one eye. No, Archie, I know who did it. But the question now is, will they confess when pressed, or must I make it unmistakable? And with that, he closed his eye again, as if the matter were merely a matter of digestion. The next day, at 4 sharp, the front door of the brownstone admitted 3 culinary suspects, each with their own brand of tension bottled and ready to pour. Chas Meeker arrived first. He was wearing a blazer too tight across the chest, chewing gum with the kind of energy that suggested he thought it made him look confident. "Place smells like an herb garden exploded," he said, glancing around. "No offense." "None taken," I said, ushering him toward the red leather chair farthest from Wolf's. "You'll be the garnish in this seating arrangement. Try not to wilt." Next came Tanya Lorkin. She wore black, like she was auditioning for a funeral, or maybe just wanted to look severe in Wolf's muted office. Her expression gave away nothing, but her heels clicked across the floor like punctuation marks on a confession. Finally, Lionel Preet entered with the quiet elegance of a man who measured his words and movements with equal precision. He wore a crisp white shirt, no tie, and gave Wolf the faintest bow, which Wolf did not return. Wolf never returned bows, handshakes, or anything else that might suggest equality. The 3 suspects arranged themselves in a triangle around Wolf's desk. I stood nearby, pad in hand, ready for the fireworks. Wolf hadn't spoken yet. He sat in his chair like a monument, immovable, composed, not deigning to begin until everyone had taken the silence personally. Then at last he spoke. "Let us be precise," he said. "Aaron Galt ingested a mild sedative. It was delivered via a spoonful of mashed potatoes. Miss Nora Carville handed him the spoon, but the additive was applied by another hand prior to the tasting. This is not speculation, it is deduction. Mr. Goodwin," I took the cue. "We now know the sedative used was a tasteless compound called zedropin, small dose, short-acting, but fast. Very traceable if you know what to look for. Turns out the Belgrave supplier lists it on their inventory. Used legally in micro quantities during specific avant-garde tastings." Chaz's jaw tightened. "Not exactly illegal, then?" "Not the substance," I said. "The delivery method." "Yes," Tanya crossed her arms. "Then go after the person who ordered it." "Done," Wolf said. "It was ordered by the pastry department, under your station." Tanya's mouth parted slightly. "That's not unusual. We use it in scent. Capsules for citrus desserts. But," Wolf continued, "you did not authorize its use that day. Someone used your access code." "Someone could have lifted it," she said, eyes flicking to Chaz. Chaz gave a bark of a laugh. "Oh, sure. Blame the loudmouth." Wolf's gaze settled on him. "You are indeed loud, and you believe this to be disarming. It is not. It is camouflage and poorly applied. You're ambitious, Mr. Meeker. Crude, impatient. You had motive." "I wanted Aaron gone." "Sure, everyone did. But not everyone had the idiocy to manufacture a 3-layered deception," Wolf said. "Let us unravel it. First, Miss Carville is framed, placed near the food with the means and opportunity, and a prior relationship with the victim. Second, a false clue is planted under Mr. Preet's station, scented parchment, absurdly mismatched, designed to be discovered. Third, the substance itself traces back to Miss Lorkin's department, which makes it look like she framed Preet to frame Carville," I added. Wolf gave a nod. "Delightfully tangled, but too tangled. The kind of puzzle that appeals only to its creator, not to reason." Lionel finally spoke. "So what are you saying, that Meeker tried to frame all of us?" "I am saying," Wolf said, voice cold and firm, "that Mr. Meeker poisoned the mashed potatoes knowing Miss Carville would serve them, that he accessed Miss Lorkin's code while she was away from her station, likely the day before during our supplier call, that he placed the parchment beneath my direction yesterday, attempting to implicate Mr. Preet by association. It was clumsy." Chaz's mouth opened, then shut, then opened again. You got no proof of that. You just think I'm dumb enough to try all this. No, Wolf said. I think you're arrogant enough to believe it would work. He tapped a finger against the armrest. You were banking on confusion, on the internal politics of the kitchen making any accusation stick to someone, on the management seizing the opportunity to cut dead weight, but you overlooked something. What? My appetite, Wolf said. I sampled the potatoes Miss Carville brought. They were excellent, too excellent. The sedative had not affected their taste nor altered the structure, meaning it had been added after they were made, not during prep. Therefore not in the bowl, not during boiling. In the spoon. Tanya sat upright. The tasting spoon, yes, the final spoon Miss Carville used to plate the dish, which she retrieved from the drawer, which she believed had been sterilized, which we discovered, thanks to Mr. Goodwin's notes, had been removed and returned 10 minutes prior by a junior line cook. I stepped in. The line cook's name was Damien. He said you asked him to find you a clean spoon, Chaz. Claimed you were in a rush. Chaz scowled. That doesn't mean I did anything. Wolf didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. It means you had the spoon. You had the sedative. You had the ambition and the cover. And you had just enough cunning to realize that Nora's clean record would be her undoing. She wouldn't believe someone could betray her in that kitchen. That was your only clever insight. Silence. Heavy, dense, final. Lionel let out a long, controlled breath. Tanya didn't say anything, but her eyes were sharp now, fixed on Chaz like he was an underbaked tart. Chaz stood. This is ridiculous. You don't have a shred of... Sit down, I said. And he did. Not because I was persuasive, but because something in Wolf's tone had broken through, like the last crack in a creme brulee crust. Belgrave will determine whether charges are filed, Wolf said. But for now I believe an apology to Miss Carville is due. You endangered a colleague, damaged your institution, and worst of all, he paused, looked disgusted. You wasted a very fine dish of mashed potatoes. That, more than anything, sealed it. Chaz didn't protest again. He just sat there, his breath shallow and the bravado gone. I could have asked if he was planning to resign, but the answer was already clear in the slump of his shoulders. Wolf looked at me. Archie. Yeah? See? Them out. Then inform Miss Carville that the matter is resolved and she may resume her post. I suggest she decline the head position, however. Let the vultures squabble over the carcass. Practical, I said. No, Wolf muttered. Tactical. One by one, I escorted them to the door. Tanya nodded once without warmth. Lionel said nothing but offered a polite nod. Chaz didn't meet my eyes. When the door finally shut, the brownstone exhaled. Silence returned, civilized and welcome. Fritz entered with a tray, a bottle of beer, a small dish of olives, and something new. I took the liberty of recreating the mashed potatoes, he said. No sedatives. Wolf gave him the ghost of a smile. I trust your seasoning far more than your sous chef's. And with that he raised his fork, and balance was restored. After the door closed behind the last of our culinary cast, I stayed in the hallway for a second, listening to the echo of retreating shoes. Chaz Mika didn't slam the gate, which told me he'd had the fight knocked out of him completely. Good. I prefer my petty saboteurs deflated and wordless. They make less noise that way. Back in the office, Wolf was already shifting in his chair with the feline contentment of a man who had restored order and was about to reward himself with starch and smugness. Fritz's newly whipped mashed potatoes sat on a tray beside a ramekin of veal gravy, a bottle of Montenegro, and a single folded napkin. You seem satisfied, I remarked, settling into my usual chair. I am not, Wolf said. I am resigned. That caught me off guard. To what? He lifted his fork and pointed it at me like it was a compass needle. To human frailty. Mr. Mika's idiocy is not unique. It is merely the latest in a parade. You're getting sentimental, I said. He took a bite, chewed, swallowed. Hardly. I am indulging in pessimism, a much more useful pastime. I let him eat in peace for a few minutes. The room had the comforting silence of a mystery wrapped up neatly, except that in my gut something hadn't quite clicked. The facts lined up, sure, the logic held. Chas Meeker had motive, means, and all the sneaky behavior you'd expect from a man who thought misdirection and a protein shake could solve everything. And yet, there was a part of me that itched. Not loudly, not insistently, but the way an old mosquito bite does when the weather turns humid, a faint thrum in the back of the skull. Wolf, he didn't open his eyes. Yes? Suppose Meeker didn't do it. He let out a sigh that could have curdled milk. Archie, I'm serious. Suppose the plan was to make him look like he did it. Frame the frame. Double deception. All that. Wolf opened his eyes and gave me the kind of look usually reserved for waiters who recommend a California wine with duck confit. Mr. Meeker is vain, noisy, and overambitious. In other words, conspicuously guilty. Exactly. Too conspicuous. Wolf set down his fork and folded his hands on his belly. Proceed. Let's walk through it. Suppose someone else wanted Nora Carville gone. She's close to Aaron. Galt, respected in the kitchen. Maybe too respected. Say respected enough to inherit the head chef position, instead of being merely considered. Go on, Wolf said warily. Now suppose that someone is smart, smarter than Meeker, smart enough to use his ego as a shield. He's loud, arrogant, known to hate Nora, and dumb enough to look guilty if you nudge him toward the right spotlight. All it takes is a bit of planting, a bit of baiting, and a few nudges. He walks right into the trap, and we fall for it. Wolf frowned, which for him is akin to panic. You are suggesting he was framed. Framed by someone who knew exactly how you think. Someone who knew how the sequence of clues would lead us to Meeker. Silence. Then Wolf rose, a rare thing indeed, and walked to the Globe Bar. He poured a half measure of brandy into a tulip glass and returned to his seat without comment. You have a name, he said finally. Yeah, I said. I do. Nora Carville. The pause that followed was sharp enough to cut air. He sipped his brandy. Explain. She was the one who came to us, brought the mashed potatoes, brought the story, claimed she was framed. But how would she know? She was framed unless she knew the sedative was in there. If it was truly a mystery to her, she might think Aaron had an allergic reaction or a stroke or something. But she walked in with the word sabotage on her lips. She is a chef, Wolf said. She has instincts. She also had opportunity. She handled the tasting spoon. She directed the line. She knew where everyone was and who had access to what. And she was the one who made sure we found the parchment scrap right where she knew Tanya had passed. She would have to be reckless. No, I said. She'd have to be desperate. That, finally, made him go still. I got up and pulled. The diagram Nora had drawn for me from my coat pocket. Spread it on the desk. She said she trusted her team, but look at this. Her notes on the prep line show something weird. The tasting spoons were kept in the drawer next to the compotes. That's pastry territory. Why not keep them at her station? Perhaps space, or control. She knew if someone tampered with them, she could say it happened outside her zone. Plausible deniability. Blame it on proximity. Wolf stared at the map, then at me. You're convinced. Enough to doubt what I was sure of yesterday. That's something. He exhaled heavily and rang for Fritz. Call Miss Carville, he told me. Ask her to return politely. Say I've reconsidered the ramifications of the kitchen hierarchy and have questions. Should I tell her you're on to her? Certainly not. But I will require a second bowl of mashed potatoes, unpoisoned. 20 minutes later, Nora Carville was back in our office, in white again, this time with a touch of lip color and a neutral expression that would have made a poker dealer proud. You asked to see me, she said. Wolf didn't rise, he didn't even blink. I did. I have a final question. Of course. Why? Wolf said softly. Did you bring the dish to me with such confidence? She hesitated. Just slightly. I knew you'd see. I was innocent. But how did you know the potatoes were the issue? Aaron said something before he collapsed. No, Miss Carville, he did not. We checked the timing. He took one bite, smiled, and fainted. No words. So how did you know? Her breath caught, and I saw it. The flicker. Not fear, anger. The plan unraveling. You don't understand what that kitchen is like, she said. They eat people alive. Aaron was leaving, but the board wasn't going to give the job to me. Not a woman who didn't play politics, so I made them play mine. You drugged him. I gave him a nap, that's all. He's fine. And now they're scared. Of me. That means they'll listen. Wolf's tone didn't change. And Mr. Meeker, he's a blowhard. And he did have motive, I just helped him make the most of it. You used him, I said. You used us. I gave you exactly what you wanted. A mystery, a clean arc, a villain with a loud mouth. You got to solve your case. Wolf got his drama. I got my job, she stood. Tell the police if you want, but I don't think you will. Wolf raised a brow. Why not? Because I wasn't wrong. I just wasn't polite. She left before either of us spoke again. The door clicked, shut like a gavel. After a moment, Wolf said, She will succeed. I nodded. I think she already has. He sighed. And what are we left with? A story about mashed potatoes, ambition, and a woman who played us both. Wolf reached for his beer. And people wonder why I never leave the house. After. Nora Carville walked out of the brownstone with the calm dignity of a queen who just knighted herself. The office stayed quiet for a good long while. Wolf didn't move, I didn't speak. Even the sounds from upstairs, Fritz lightly clinking pots, probably prepping for dinner, felt like background noise in a courtroom after the verdict drops. Eventually, Wolf reached for his beer with a heaviness that didn't come from thirst. He took one slow sip and stared at the globe as if contemplating moving to a part of the world where sous chefs didn't plot psychological coups. She was correct, he said finally. She was. I agreed. But I hate that she was. He looked over at me, his expression not smug, not irritable, just contemplative, like he was trying to taste test the ethics of the situation and found the seasoning too bitter. I underestimated her, he said. That is my fault. Join the club, we're printing jackets. Wolf didn't respond to that. He leaned back and laced his fingers across his considerable midsection, eyes half closed. She did not want to be exonerated, he said. She wanted to be remembered, to be feared. That's a different kind of vindication. And she got it. You saw her face. She left nothing to chance, he murmured. She came to me not seeking justice, but cashing blame. She placed the crime gently in Mr. Meeker's path and waited for his clumsy shoes to trample it. And she knew you'd trace the logic just far enough. She left the right breadcrumbs, Wolf admitted, and I, as a matter of habit and pride, followed them. That was as close as Wolf ever got to saying he'd been outplayed, not completely, not even cleanly, but just enough that it left a mark. And while I wasn't exactly weeping for Chas Meeker, it still twisted something in my gut. We weren't in the business of catching just the most obvious criminal. We were supposed to be better than that. Wolf turned toward me with something unreadable in his eyes. She wanted to be head chef, he said. Not through votes, not through merit, but through legend. She'll have that now, until someone hungrier comes along. Or smarter. Perhaps, Wolf said, but few would dare. The afternoon bled into evening. Fritz served dinner, lamb with a crust that could win awards, and something green and complicated I didn't identify but ate without complaint. Wolf was more silent than usual through it, and not because the food was disappointing. He was thinking. And when Wolf thought this long, it usually meant one of two things. He was planning something or he was regretting something. After dinner, we retired to the office. He settled into his chair. I poured myself a cup of coffee, ignoring the sting of betrayal still lounging somewhere behind my left ear. "Do you think she'll do it again?" I asked. Wolf gave a short, humorless laugh. "Poison someone with potatoes. I suspect once was enough. I mean manipulate her way into victory, into power. She already has," he said. "Her name will pass in whispers through that kitchen now. She will plate fear beside every entree. She will become a myth. She could have been that without the sedative." "No," Wolf said. "She couldn't. Talent is not enough. Authority requires spectacle. She created one." I let that hang in the air a bit. It was true, and that was what made it awful. "Are we really going to let her walk?" I asked. "She framed a man, manipulated us, poisoned a colleague, even if it was just enough to knock him out. Doesn't that count for something?" "It does," Wolf said. "But she was correct about one thing. We have no evidence that will endure scrutiny. The sedative was metabolized. The tasting spoon has been washed. The note under Mr. Preet's board is ambiguous, and her confession, such as it was shrouded in abstraction." Damn. Yes. It was around then that the doorbell rang. I glanced at Wolf. He frowned deeply. "You are expecting someone?" "Nope." "Pfui. Go." I went. On the stoop stood Aaron Galt, the chef himself. Upright, alert, looking 5 years older than when I'd seen him in Nora's phone photo, but fully vertical and carrying a flat box wrapped in wax paper. "Mr. Goodwin?" he asked, his voice gravelly but precise. "Yeah, you're Aaron Galt. I've come to thank Mr. Wolf. And perhaps ask a question." I stepped aside and waved him in. "You're late to the party, Mr. Galt, but you may have just brought dessert." He followed me into the office. Wolf's eyebrows lifted half an inch, which for him was as good as applause. "Mr. Galt," he said, "you are recovered." "I am, and curious." He sat uninvited but respectfully and set the box down on the desk. "First," he said, "thank you. I'm told you helped clear the air around the incident. The owners aren't pursuing charges. I'm stepping down, but without disgrace." "You're welcome," Wolf said. "Though the air may not be as clear as you suppose," Galt nodded. "So I've gathered." He opened the box. Inside were 6 delicate pastries, cream-filled, citrus-glazed, dusted with just enough powdered sugar to catch the light. I heard Fritz inhale sharply from the hallway. "These are for Fritz," Galt said. "A peace offering. He's tasted my work before. I owed him something finer." Wolf nodded his approval. "He will appreciate it." Galt hesitated, then leaned forward. "I have a question," he said. "Not as a chef, as a man." "Proceed." "Nora," Galt said. "Did she do it?" Silence again. Wolf didn't blink. I didn't move. "She claims innocence," Galt said, "but she always wanted it, the top position, more than she ever let on. I saw the signs, but I also believed in her. I trusted her." Wolf was silent for a moment longer. Then he said, "Would it alter your course if I answered?" Galt considered that. "No. But I'd like to know what story to tell myself when I look back on it." Wolf looked down at his hands. Then quietly he said, "She did not poison you. She did adjust the narrative." Galt exhaled. "That's what I thought." He stood. "She'll be a good chef, maybe a great one. But I hope someone keeps an eye on her. Power changes people. Sometimes not enough. Sometimes too much." He left the pastries, thanked us again, and went. I closed the door behind him. Wolf picked up one of the pastries, examined it, then set it back down. "Well," he said, "that was unexpected." "Maybe not," I replied. "Maybe even the poisoned want closure. Closure is overrated." "So is justice," I said. "But we keep showing up for it." Wolf leaned back and closed his eyes. "For dessert," he murmured. "That will do." Fritz delivered the pastries to the kitchen with the reverence of a man transporting crown jewels. Wolf didn't touch them, not right away. When he refuses dessert, something's off. I stayed in the office, perched on the arm of the red chair, watching him stew in thought, not his usual irritated, impatient, kind but something weightier, more reflective. The office clock ticked loud enough to suggest Fritz needed to oil it again, or maybe that was just my nerves listening too hard. After a long stretch of nothing, I cleared my throat. "You thinking about Galt?" "No," Wolf said. "I'm thinking about Miss Carville. That's not exactly a palate cleanser." He cracked one eye open. "She is the rarest kind of adversary, one who did not gloat." "She didn't have to," I said. "She won." "Precisely." He sat forward. An event momentous enough for me to swing my legs off the chair and sit properly. "She arranged the game," Wolf continued, "invited me to play, and exited before the applause. Which makes me wonder, was her goal truly power? Or something more abstract? Revenge?" He shook his head. "She had no personal grievance. No history of mistreatment, at least not specific. No vendetta. But she did speak of being overlooked, of not being heard." Still sounds like ambition to me. Perhaps. But ambition craves recognition. What she craved was fear. She wanted to be an idea. That is something else. I leaned back, letting that settle. So now what? We let her keep the kitchen and hope no one else dozes off into the gazpacho? "We watch," Wolf said. "And wait. If she steps beyond this calculated gesture, if she harms again, we act. How you're assuming we'll get another chance. People like her," he said. "Don't stop at one performance. They crave encores." The phone rang. I picked it up. "Goodwin. Archie." It was Saul Panzer. Quiet voice, but urgent. "Saul, you don't usually call without reason. I've got one now. You told me to keep my ears open around the Belgrave circle. I had dinner with a wine importer last night. Talk drifted. He's connected to one of the investors behind Belgrave. Go. On. He says the board never considered Nora for head chef. Ever. She wasn't even in the top 3. Apparently Aaron Galt himself blocked her promotion quietly 6 months ago. Said she was talented, but not ready. She never knew." My spine straightened. "You sure?" "The investors sure said Galt kept it discreet to protect her. Thought she'd grow into it." I looked over at Wolf. He'd caught the tone of the call and was now fully alert. "Thanks, Saul," I said. "I owe you a steak." "You owe me a safe dinner. I don't trust potatoes anymore." I hung up. Wolf raised a brow. "She didn't. No," I said. "That they never intended to promote her. That Galt was the one who blocked it." Wolf closed his eyes and whispered something in Latin I didn't catch. Then he opened them again. "Then we were wrong. Her motive was not dominance, it was retaliation. She thought he betrayed her," I said, "but he was trying to protect her. And now," Wolf said slowly, "he believes she merely adjusted the narrative. Puis. I told him a lie, thinking it kind. It may become a wound. What do we do?" Wolf tapped the armrest, once, twice, then said, "You will return to Belgrave. Speak to Miss Carville. Tell her what you've learned. She'll deny it. Of course. That is not the point. What is the point? To observe her reaction?" Belgrave was quieter that evening. Less theatrical energy, more like the eye of a storm that had already passed. I entered through the side, flashed my credentials, and found Nora in the back, going over a shipment of saffron like she was pricing rare diamonds. She looked up. No surprise, no smile. "Mr. Goodwin, Chef Carville, come to check if I've poisoned the soup." "Not today, I came with information." Her posture didn't change, but the pause before her next word told me she knew this wasn't. "A courtesy call, I'm listening." "An investor with the board says you were never in line to replace Galt. Not officially. Galt himself blocked your promotion 6 months ago. Quietly. Said you weren't ready yet." For just a second I saw the flicker. It wasn't rage, it was confusion. And then a subtle, cracking grief, like a fault line under her composure had shifted. "No," she said, "not to me, to the air." "That's not possible. He did it to protect you. He believed in your growth, not your moment." She turned away from me, picked up a clove and rolled it between her fingers. "You think I drugged him for revenge? I think you believed he betrayed you," I said. "And that made the decision easier." Her voice was low. "I thought he stood in my way. I thought he saw me as a threat. He saw you as a future, just not quite present." Silence again, a long one. Then she said, "It's too late now. Not for everything." She turned back. The expression she wore wasn't guilt. It was tragedy. "How you're not going to report this," she said. "Wolf's not going to expose me." "No. Why?" "Because you didn't kill anyone," I said. "Because Galt survived. Because your crime was one of intent. And the law's not built for that kind. And because," she added, "you both admire what I did." That landed like a stone dropped into a bowl of soup. She smiled, just a little. "You hate that you do, but you do." I didn't respond. She didn't need. Me too. As I turned to leave, she said, "What if I do it again?" "Then Wolf will make sure it's your last performance." She nodded. "That's fair." Back at the brownstone, I gave Wolf the rundown. "She was surprised," I said, "and hurt, which means she didn't know." He nodded slowly. "And what did she say?" "That it's too late. And she's right. She cannot undo it. And Galt cannot unknow what she chose." He rose again, twice in one day, which might have been a sign of the apocalypse, and walked to the window. The orchids loomed in rows behind the glass, serene. "Hand unforgiving. She will rise," Wolf said, "and fall. They all do." "Do we warn Galt? No. His peace was hard won. We do not take it from him. So what do we do?" Wolf turned and looked at me. "We wait," he said, "and we remember." And with that, he sat down. Dinner was served 5 minutes later. No mashed potatoes, just roast chicken with a wild mushroom risotto. Balanced, honest, comforting, the kind of food that didn't lie, which was nice for a change. The next morning brought rain, thin, silvery streaks, tapping politely against the windows of the brownstone like a chorus line of butlers requesting entrance. Fritz was slicing shallots in the kitchen, the smell wafting in warm and sharp. Wolf was in the plant rooms, somewhere amid 10,000 orchids, swaddled in humidity and silence. I was at my desk going through bills, invoices, and a half-finished crossword when the doorbell rang. It was early. Too early for clients, reporters, or delivery men with a flair for the dramatic. And after the kind of week we'd had, my nerves were tuned to pick up irregular rhythms. I opened the door. Aaron Galt stood on the stoop again, but this time he didn't bring pastries. He looked older. Not by years, but by weight. He was carrying something invisible and heavy, and judging by the shape of his mouth and the lack of umbrella, he'd been standing outside for a minute before pressing the bell. "I need to speak to Mr. Wolf," he said. "Now." I stepped aside and ushered him into the front room. "He's with the orchids. Give me 2 minutes." Wolf doesn't like being disturbed in the plant rooms. I've seen him ignore house fires, phone calls from governors, and once an active robbery report, all in the name of orchid preservation. But I'd also learned the difference between a petty intrusion and a necessary one. This was the latter. opened the glass door halfway and said, "Sorry to violate the sanctity, but Galt's back. He looks like he just swallowed a fistful of nails. Says it's urgent." A pause. Then, slowly, Wolf emerged from behind a thick cluster of paphiopedilums, towel in hand, already wiping condensation from his palms. We reconvened in the office. Galt didn't sit. He stood near the bookshelves, dripping faintly onto the carpet, and looked at Wolf with the kind of stare you use when the world has rearranged itself without asking permission. "She knew," he said. Wolf said nothing. "She knew," Galt repeated. "All this time I thought maybe she was mistaken, maybe she misunderstood, but I spoke to Tanya last night. She said Nora found out weeks ago that the board wasn't considering her, that I'd recommended against her." I glanced at Wolf. His expression hadn't changed, but the stillness of it felt sharper than a shout. Galt continued. "Tanya said Nora confronted her about it, accused her of poisoning the board against her. Tanya told her flat out it had been me. And Nora just smiled, didn't argue, didn't react. That was 2 weeks before the mashed potatoes. She lied to you," I said softly. "To both of us." "No," Wolf murmured. "She told us the truth she needed us to hear." "That is not the same." Galt shook his head, bewildered. "She knew I tried to protect her, and she still did. She wanted a legacy," Wolf said. "She believed yours stood in the way." Galt collapsed into the red leather chair like the weight had finally gotten permission to sit down. "I gave her my best," he said. "My time, my trust, my kitchen." "You gave her your silence," Wolf corrected. "That was your mistake." Galt looked up, startled. "You protected her, yes, but you did not speak plainly. You let her believe. You allowed her ambitions to ferment in shadow. When ambition does not meet air, it turns to poison." "She wouldn't have taken the truth," Galt muttered. "Then she never had a future as your heir," Wolf said. "Only your successor." There was no pleasure in Wolf's voice, no smugness, just the dry, judicial cadence of a man pronouncing the cause of death. Galt leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I want to warn the board." "You can," Wolf said, "but they won't act unless she fails. Until then, she is revenue and innovation and threat all in one. That makes her invincible." Stood. "We could pressure her. Leak the story, stir the pot." Wolf shook his head. "It would collapse without gain. No evidence, no crime, and the truth is a ghost without a body." Galt sat for a long while, watching the rain bead on the window. "I loved that kitchen," he said, "even when it chewed me up. I thought I was leaving it in capable hands." "You did," Wolf said, "just not kind ones." Eventually, Galt left. He said nothing else, just nodded once and walked into the wet grey morning like a man who'd buried something. I turned to Wolf. "You let her win. He didn't move. You knew, before she ever confessed. You knew, and you still let her walk." "Yes." "Why?" Wolf turned to me, slowly, deliberately. "Because some battles are not won by exposure, Archie. Some are only lost more bitterly. You don't believe that?" "No," he said. "But today I choose to act as if I do." He reached for his beer but didn't drink it. He set it down again. His appetite was missing. "She will make enemies," he said. "She already has. Her ascent will not be smooth." "You think someone else will take her down?" "I think she will do it herself. She is not built for peace. Her triumph is a house of mirrors." "Still," I said, "she played us. She used us. Like a tool. And you don't mind?" He looked at me, eyes narrowed. "I mind profoundly. But I do not sulk when a scalpel cuts cleanly. I learn its shape." The day wore on. Wolf eventually retreated upstairs, citing an orchid concern he invented on the spot. I went back to paperwork, but every page I touched felt thin, unimportant. like it didn't belong in the same reality as the week we'd just crawled out of. By mid-afternoon, Fritz returned from errands with a small note addressed to Wolf. It wasn't handwritten typed, single sheet, no signature. "We all have appetites, thank you for respecting mine." Wolf read it once, folded it, set it aflame in the ashtray. "She's clever," I said. "She's dangerous," he replied. The ashes curled inward like secrets recoiling from the light. That night at dinner, the mashed potatoes didn't return to the table. Fritz served risotto again, just in case. Rain still clung to the gutters the next morning, but the world outside had resumed its usual rhythm. Cabs honking with civic enthusiasm, pigeons holding sidewalk debates, and the city exhaling steam like a tired bull. Inside the brownstone, we were back to habit. Breakfast at 9, silence until 9:30, and the sound of Wolf's chair creaking gently as he read the Times while ignoring it. I was at my desk with the phone cradled to my shoulder, arguing with a man from a dry cleaner who had managed to ruin not one but two of my jackets. Wolf disapproved of my tone, but not enough to intervene. He was neck-deep in a food review column that claimed asparagus foam was the future of cuisine, and you could practically see his blood pressure rise like bread dough. The case was over, officially. No charges, no formal aftermath, but like a soup made with the wrong base, it still lingered, strange on the tongue and heavier than it should have been. When I finally got off the phone, I said, "We're back to normal. Want me to go out and find someone being poisoned the old-fashioned way?" Wolf didn't look up. "Normal is a myth, Mr. Goodwin. So is closure." "I'll take half of each," I said. "With coffee." He grunted. At 11, the phone rang. Again. This time the voice belonged to Lon Cohen from the Gazette. "Archie," he said. "I don't want to push, but something weird's going on at Belgrave. You want to tell me what you and Wolf were doing there last week?" "No," I said, "but I want to hear what you heard." "Fair enough." He exhaled. "There's talk in the food scene. 2 cooks quit yesterday. Tanya Lawkin's taken a sudden leave. The new head chef, what's her name? Nora Carville. She's put the place into what one source called military lockdown. No talking to press. New protocols, menu overhaul. Sounds like someone's circling the wagons. It also sounds like someone's hiding something, or tightening the screws." I paused. "You think she's in trouble?" "No," Lon said. "I think she knows she should be." That gave me pause. "You printing this? Only if I can verify it, but I figured you might want the courtesy call." "Consider it appreciated." I hung up and looked at Wolf. "Tanya's out. 2 cooks gone. Nora's. Locked the kitchen down tighter than Fort Knox with indigestion." He raised a brow. "She's consolidating power. Or she's reacting to something. She's ensuring there are no loose threads." Wolf rose and walked to the window, arms folded, watching the street below. That always meant he was thinking about something he didn't like. And thinking hard. "She's overcorrecting," he said. "That is dangerous. To her. To everyone near her. When a ruler fears dissent, they tighten control. And when that control fails..." He left the sentence hanging like a bad smell. At 3 o'clock the doorbell rang again. It was Saul Panzer. Now Saul doesn't make house calls unless something's truly worth getting Wolf's attention. He stepped into the hallway, brushed, rain off his collar and handed me a folder. "Found something you'll want to see," he said. Wolf was waiting in the office. Saul gave him a nod, sat in the green chair, and opened the folder like a magician revealing a trick he didn't particularly enjoy performing. "I went back through staff turnover reports at Belgrave for the last 2 years, he said, "focusing on people who left suddenly. No notice, no press, no explanation. Found 6. 6? I asked. "That's not abnormal for a high-stress kitchen." "Sure," Saul said. "Except 3 of them were junior sous chefs who worked under Nora Carville directly. And all 3 were gone within 3 months of starting. No official complaints filed, no write-ups, just gone." Wolf was stone still. "Did you contact them?" "I found one," Saul said. Lives in Brooklyn now. Man named Rafael Cordero. Works at a bistro in Park Slope. I went to see him. Told him I was asking about his time at Belgrave. And? I asked. He didn't want to talk. Said it was not worth it. Said the job was fine, the pressure was high, typical stuff. But when I asked about Nora, he froze. Said she was focused. Said she was sharp. And then said she didn't forget mistakes. Wolf closed his eyes. She drove them out. That's the impression, Saul said. One of the others left the industry completely. The third moved out of state, all young, talented, new to high-end kitchens. She tests them, Wolf said, pressures them, and when they don't meet her standards, she removes them. Saul nodded. No mess, no evidence, just quiet exits. We were quiet for a moment. Then Wolf said, She's grooming the perfect kitchen and removing the imperfect humans. She believes in excellence, Wolf murmured, at any cost. I frowned. You think she's dangerous to more than just reputations? Wolf opened his eyes. I think Miss Carville is what happens when ambition mates with intellect and sheds its skin of restraint. She won't kill, not yet, not with her hands, but she may destroy. Destroy what? Those who resist her. I turned to Saul. You think she's unraveling? No, he said. I think she's becoming. That chilled me more than any confession we'd heard that week. Saul left a short time later. Wolf asked Fritz for a glass of brandy. Not beer, brandy. Which in our world is a red flag, a white flag, and a firework in one. We sat for a while, the day sliding toward evening, the city hissing with wet tires outside. You regret letting her walk, I said. No, Wolf said. I regret that we were only one act in her play. She's writing the rest, and no one will edit her. You think she'll fail? Wolf looked down at his glass. No, he said. I think she'll win, and I think the price will be high. And that was the last we said on the matter that day. Dinner came. Rain continued. Fritz served roast duck with pomegranate glaze. Still no mashed potatoes. Still no desire to ask for them. Just silence, and the knowledge that somewhere in Manhattan, a kitchen was running like a machine with teeth, run by a woman who had rewritten the rules of justice, excellence, and fear, and we had helped her do it. The following week unfolded, with an eerie calm. Wolf resumed his routine with methodical precision. Orchids in the morning, lunch promptly at 1, the afternoon reserved for reading and growling at the Times. I handled errands, answered mail, turned down 2 potential clients, one of whom believed her cat was channeling her late husband, and tried not to think about Nora Carville. Tried and failed. There was something about the way the case had ended or hadn't that kept coming back to me in idle moments. Not guilt, exactly. Wolf had made a decision, and I'd gone along with it. The problem was that Nora hadn't just manipulated Mika, Galt, and Wolf. She'd rewritten the rules mid-game and walked away with the prize without ever laying her cards on the table. And people were starting to notice. 3 separate mentions in food columns, 1 whisper in a rival chef's interview, a quiet mention from Fritz, who, despite being immune to gossip, noted that 2 of his suppliers had stopped servicing Belgrave. Without explanation. She is efficient, Fritz said, handing me a lemon tart, but frightening. Even he wasn't smiling, and Fritz usually smiled when pastry was involved. I brought the tart into Wolf's office without knocking. He looked up, read my face, and said, "Which one of them is dead?" "None yet." He accepted the tart with a grunt. "Then do not barge in like a grim reaper in a seersucker suit." "I bring word from the battlefield," I said. "And the soldiers are deserting." Wolf took a bite and chewed thoughtfully. "Suppliers?" 2. Dropped without explanation. "Fritz suspects intimidation. She is consolidating. More like cleansing." He finished the tart in silence, then dabbed his lips with a napkin and said, "And yet the restaurant thrives. No public scandal, no police, no suspicion." "She learned from us," I said. "She watched how you unraveled everything, then made sure no one could ever do the same to her. She removed uncertainty," Wolf said. "She is now the fixed point around which all things orbit. Until gravity shifts. She will not allow that." He rose, not dramatically, just enough to pace, which in Wolf terms meant the case had sunk its teeth in again. "I cannot decide whether she's a villain or merely a sharper version of what the world rewards." "That's the problem," I said. "Neither can anyone else." At 4 that afternoon, the doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen stealing a second tart, so Fritz answered it. When he returned, he looked puzzled. He held a small white envelope, sealed in red wax. Wolf took it from him, inspected the seal, no monogram, no crest, then broke it. Inside was a single card, thick and ivory-colored. On it, typed in flawless serif font, "Thank you for your part in my evolution." That was it. No name, no signature, just acknowledgement. Wolf stared at it for a long moment before setting it in the ashtray. He didn't burn it this time. He left it, sitting there, like a silent guest. "She knows the story is done," he said. "But she wants us to remember it. She doesn't want closure, she wants immortality. She believes she's earned it." "Has she?" Wolf considered. "History will decide, and history rarely favors kindness." That night, I dreamt of Belgrave, not the real one, but a dark candle-lit version where every plate held a secret and every spoon came with a risk. Nora stood at the pass, calm and precise, her eyes watching every dish like a general preparing troops for war. And behind her, somewhere in the shadows, Wolf sat at a table, alone. His chair turned slightly away from the light, as if he, too, knew he'd been part of something more permanent than a case. When I woke up, it was still dark. I made coffee and sat in the office with only the lamp on. The card was still in the ashtray. At 7, Wolf came down early, unusual, and poured himself a brandy before breakfast. He didn't speak. I didn't press. At 8, the phone rang. It was Saul. "I thought you'd want to know," he said. "Belgrave's pastry chef, just quit, no notice. Said she couldn't work under those conditions." "New one?" "Yeah, lasted 6 days." I passed the news to Wolf. He nodded slowly, then said, "The house is still clean. But no. One wants to live in it. Eventually someone will push back," I said, "or walk away, and she'll be alone." Wolf glanced at the card again. "No, Archie, she won't be alone. She'll be remembered." We both knew what he meant. The case hadn't ended. It had just left our jurisdiction, but its echo, her echo, would linger in kitchens and whispers and reputations for years. And maybe that was the most dangerous thing of all. The ones who win without ever breaking the rules, just bending them until they fit like knives in the right hands. Dinner that night was a quiet affair. Roast pheasant, braised fennel. No starch. When Fritz asked Wolf if he wanted mashed potatoes, Wolf said without hesitation, "No." And that, I thought, might be the real conclusion. Not justice, not vengeance, just memory, seasoned, plated, and served cold. The final curtain didn't fall with a bang. It never does at the brownstone. It came slowly, like the last notes of a string quartet trailing off into air that suddenly feels too quiet. 2 weeks after Saul's last report from Belgrave, the ripples stopped reaching us. No more resignations, no more whispers, no more notes, sealed in wax. It was as if Nora Carville had closed the kitchen doors and built the walls higher, and the world, impatient and starved for new scandal, had moved on to a mayor's missing cousin and a reality TV chef caught smuggling caviar in a boot. Wolf returned to his old routine with the steady stubbornness of a man determined to outlast everything, even memory. "And me," I was still checking the Gazette food section more often than usual, waiting for a tremor. But Belgrave's name had vanished like smoke. No articles, no interviews, no profile pieces on rising culinary stars. Just silence. One Wednesday, mid-morning, while Fritz experimented with trout terrine in the kitchen and Wolf reclined with a book on the psychology of preference, the phone rang. I answered. It was Aaron Galt. I'm calling from Florence, he said. Italy. I've retired properly this time. Congratulations, I said. I trust the mashed potatoes are safer over there. He chuckled, but it was dry. I wanted to thank Mr. Wolf again. He helped me understand something I never would have seen on my own. He's good at that. He told me once that protecting someone isn't the same as preparing them. He was right. I protected Nora too long. She didn't think she needed preparing. No, and that's why she's alone now. I hear things even from here. Her kitchen is perfect but empty. She has no lieutenants, no allies, just silence and obedience. That's not a kitchen, I said. That's a mausoleum. He didn't disagree. Anyway, if you ever find yourselves in Florence, dinner's on me, and no potatoes. We said our goodbyes and I hung up. Wolf was watching me. Galt? Florence, retired, peaceful, grateful. He will write a memoir. It will sell modestly. He said Nora's kingdom is spotless and silent. Of course it is, Wolf muttered. No one speaks in a gallery of statues. He stood, which by now had returned to being rare. He walked to the window, hands behind his back, and stared down at the street as if the city itself were a suspect. You believe it's over? I asked. No, he said. But it is concluded. Semantics. Distinctions, he corrected. There is a difference between finality and completion. Miss Carville's story is not finished, but our part in it is. I poured myself a coffee and leaned back in the red chair. She won, I said. No, Wolf said, turning from the window. She survived. There is a distinction there as well. She played us. She involved us, he said, because she required validation, not of her innocence, but of her genius, and we gave it. That was our error. And if she reaches too far again, then the world will not be as indulgent. I sipped my coffee. You ever consider writing her a letter? Wolf gave me a flat look. I do not correspond with sovereigns. That was that. The day moved on. At lunch, Fritz served duck à l'orange. No starch. Wolf praised the sauce and asked for the bones, which he rarely does. I took that as a sign he was back to form, digestive and otherwise. Later that night, as I was closing up the front room, I passed the office and saw something on Wolf's desk. The card from Nora. The one with the clean font and no signature. It hadn't been burned after all, just moved. Set between two books like a bookmark for a chapter he hadn't decided to reread yet. I thought about asking him why he kept it. Then I didn't. There are some souvenirs you don't carry for sentiment, but for warning. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I found myself thinking not of Nora, but of the next one, because there's always a next one. The world's full of ambitious people, and some of them don't mind using knives, whether in kitchens or in conversation. And Nero Wolf, for all his size and solitude, still draws them in. They think they can outthink him. Sometimes, for a while, they do, but there's something about Wolf's victories that lasts longer than headlines, longer than guilt, even longer than memory. They echo, like a name whispered in a clean kitchen, or a card left in an ashtray. The game, as ever, continues. And so do we.